Hi, and welcome to another video by Jim the Car Guy. Today we have a 2003 Ford Taurus. Customer complaint is when they drive the vehicle, there's a loud rumbling noise coming from the wheels in the front of the car. And as the speed increases, the noise also increases too. When you're on the road and you change lanes from left to right, the pitch of the noise changes along with it, which tells me it's a hub bearing. I did do the hub bearing on the right side. It's a little bit of a pain in the rear end because of the age of the car and the rust. But I'm going to bring you in here. I'm going to show you how to do it, and we'll get this job done. All right, first thing we're going to do is we need to remove the brake caliper, remove the rotor, and remove the knuckle, the mounting caliper knuckle, and that'll give us access to the bearing behind it. On this particular job, you cannot get there's 3 bolts to hold the bearing in place. You cannot remove the upper bolt without dropping the lower control arm away from the knuckle so we can get in there to get to it. But I'm going to bring you in there. I'll show you what it looks like and what we're going to do. All right, so let's get in there. I'll show you what to do. I'll explain to you what's happening here first. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect the brake rotor, and the way we're going to do that is quite simply we're going to remove this bolt here, this bolt here. We're going to take the caliper and hang it off to the side with a wire. We're going to remove this mounting bracket here, which is basically this bolt here, and one more down the bottom. Now let me just show you those bolts underneath here I was telling you about. The bolts that you can remove here is this bolt here, and there's one on the back which you can get to also, but you can see how the ABS ring is so close here that you can't get it out. Even when you push the axle back, you can't get in there with a socket to get to it. And the third bolt is actually up underneath the top, right in there. I don't know if you can see it in there, but it's right up inside here. So it makes it very difficult. So we're going to disconnect the knuckle, and we're going to move it away from the car, and that'll give us enough room to get in there so we can actually remove the bolts that we need to. All right, so we are going to disconnect the lower ball joint here, and we'll take that cotter pin out, take this nut off. I am going to use some air guns because it's late in the day and I want to try to get this thing done. So we are going to take this out, and then we're going to use a fork to separate the ball joint from the lower control arm. So, all right, enough talking. Let's grab some tools and let's get to work. Okay, I want to give you an example of what tools you're going to need to actually complete this job. Obviously, you're going to need a hammer, a pair of cutting pliers, a couple of sockets. I think there's a 12 millimeter and a 15 millimeter. You're going to need a ratchet, of course. The longer reach, the better. You're going to need a socket to take off the axle nut right here. And we're going to need this to take apart the lower ball joint. So, all right, let's get started. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out those bolts in the back. They're 12 millimeter. We're going to take those out for the brake caliper. Don't lose the bolts because obviously you're going to need to put them back in. We never want to let the caliper hang by itself, so you want to take a piece of wire and secure it up and out of the way. We're going to take the brake pads out. We are going to be reusing these, just so you know. Next thing we want to do is remove that mounting bracket. That's that 15 millimeter bolts in the back. We'll just relocate this to the side for now. And then we can take our rotor off the car. We're going to air gun this nut off right here. Just so you know, I think that's a 30 millimeter. Cover your ears. Don't lose that, because you're going to need to use this again later on to put it back together. Now we're going to take that cotter pin out down the bottom that we talked about down here. Air gun this bolt out here too, the nut for the ball joint. Okay. Now there's different ways of separating the ball joint. You can get in there with an impact chisel to get it out, or you can use a fork like this. And you basically just put it in through the bottom right here, and you tap it. Right out. Now what you're going to need, you're going to need a very large crowbar in order to push the lower control arm down a little bit, so you can pull the ball joint out like that. And you can push your axle all the way in. And then we're going to take out the bolts in the back, because now you have a clean access to it once you take this out. We're going to put these off to the side. Now the one up on the top is a little bit tighter to get to. You're probably going to have to get in here with an extension, like this. See how it hits into the axle here? And now it gives us a little bit more room. Let me set it up and I'll show you. And the last bolt we're going to take out is down in the back, in that corner over here. Take the bolt out. Now, if it's true to form, the other side was a real pain in the rear end to get off, so we had to beat it a little bit to get it out. So I'm going to hit it here a couple times and we'll see if we can get it to move. It's starting to move, but not too much. Let's give it a couple more shots and we'll see. Sorry I had to cut away from that, but this thing here was a real pain in my rear end to get out. I wound up having to put my headset on and use my impact to get that thing out of there. So and that's what the bearing came out like, in a bunch of pieces. So all right, so sometimes they can be a real pain in the rear end. Now if you don't have the impact like this to shoot it out of there, you can get in the back of it and try to bang it out. But this one here, to be truthful, this was a real pain in the rear end to get this out. All right, I'm going to take some emery now. I'm going to clean this all up really good in here. And then we're going to come back and we'll put it back together. So, all right, let me catch my breath and we'll come right back. Okay, this is a little bit of a tight spot to get in here and clean it up. Well, we're going to clean it up really good with some emery. And then we're going to use some never-sees. And we'll put it back together. So. I'll use some never-sees on everything. I never-sees the bearing as well as the opening in here. And then we just stick our bearing just loosely for now, but there's only one way this bearing goes in, so make sure all your bolts line up. I'm actually going to never-sees the bolts too. All right, and we'll catch each one of them by hand. Like I said, there's only one way that this bearing goes in. So if it's the wrong way, you just have to keep on turning it until you get it to the right way. And we're not going to tighten this up yet. We're just going to catch them in here loosely. Okay, now we have more caught. We can start to tighten them up, and you're going to tighten them up sequentially. You don't go tightening one real tight and then come back and try to get the other in. You snug each one of them down a little bit each time. Okay, bearing is now tight. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to pull this out like this, and we'll slide our axle back in. Hope it'll block you. Like this. Get the axle so it lines up. And then we're going to need our big pry bar to pull that. Let's see if I can get in here without knocking my camera over. Lines up with the bearing, which it does. And then we got to get the ball joint back into the knuckle. You know what? I'm going to have to cut away. I don't want to destroy my camera. Let me just put you off to the side for a second. And we'll have you watch from this angle. Let's see how that does. All right. Destroy my light. Okay. you can see that. It is a little bit of a pain in the ass to do, just so you know. But you got to get in there with a pry bar. And then once you got it in there, it just pops right up like that. I'm going to leave you right there, I think. All right, catch that nut by hand. Now we just line it up and make sure the cotter pin lines up with the hole in here. I know I go against everything I keep saying, and I'm going to do everything by hand, but this one here kicked my ass a little bit, so sorry about using the air guns. All right, we'll tighten this nut back on for the axle. Nice and tight. Our bolt on the bottom is tight. We're going to come in there now with our cotter pin, and we're going to tighten up the cotter pin. Alright, I just want to make this perfectly clear to you too. Make sure the backing plate didn't get bent and touch the rotor. As you can see here, I hit it there. So we're just going to straighten that out a little bit. This way we make sure we don't touch the rotor. Alright, so now we have this tight, the axle nut is tight, our ball joint is then tight. Next thing we're going to do is we did tighten up these 3 bolts in the back that hold the bearing in place. We're going to put our rotor back on. Grab the rotor. Now, the rotor moves around a little bit, so just screw a nut like this onto it. It'll hold it in place for you and hopefully give you a little bit more able to work without losing anything. We're going to put our mounting bracket back on, and we're just going to replace the 2 bolts that we previously took out of the back. Now you want to catch them both by hand before you tighten them up all the way. And once you have them both caught, now you can tighten it up all the way. Same thing on the bottom bolt. Nice and tight. Now, I just want to point this out about these brake pads too. These brake pads have the anti-rattle clips built on right here. So what you got to do is when you put this caliper back on, you have to make sure the caliper pushes on these pieces like this and pushes it in. I've seen a lot of cars where this piece here is sticking through the opening of the caliper. So be careful when you put it back on. And I'll show you what I normally do. Put the inner one back in. Put the outer one back in. And you can see they both fall down like this. My favorite stuff, the grease again. We're going to take our caliper. In here is where those rattle clips touch into. What I always do is put a little grease on here. Makes this slide a lot easier when you try to get this back together. All right, then you put it over the top like this. Put it back into where it belongs, and you look in through here to make sure your clips are okay. And you can push it in, and you'll feel it pushing back at you. As you push it in, you'll feel it pushing back, and then you know that your clips are in correctly. I catch the top one, and then you push the bottom, and you'll feel it like spring-loaded, like it's pushing back out, which is exactly what you want it to do. Catch this other bolt in there. And last but not least, let's tighten up that caliper, and we'll get this job out the door. That's it. Now, we're just going to recap exactly what we did again, so that way you don't have any issues. Okay, let's take that off. Okay, so we're just going to make sure that the bolts on the back of the bearing are all tight, all three of them. Our axle is then put through, and the axle nut is tight. The bolt that holds the caliper mounting bracket to the knuckle is tight, both top and bottom. Our caliper is tightened on. Our brake pads are in properly, and also those clips are in properly. We tightened up the axle nut, as I said. That's it. We're all done. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this for a test drive and make sure everything is okay. But judging by how that bearing came apart, it's definitely the issue, no doubt in my mind. All right, and there's all the bearings that came apart. All right, as always, thanks for watching. Any questions or comments, or you need any advice, send me an email. Be more than happy to talk to anybody about anything. As always, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.